welcome back to another Film Geek video, and it is that time of year again. Time for me to break down all of my favorite movies of 2024. Now, each month I do a ranking video where I go through and decide my favorite to least favorite film of the month. So what I've done is I've gone back and taken all of that into consideration. I'm going to do this in a ranking format because I think it's fun and also off the cuff. I don't ever set these up beforehand. I'm gonna be totally honest with you guys. When I make the ranking videos, it is totally in the moment. I am almost streaming. Yes, I can go back and edit and everything, but everything I'm doing in that moment is just me making up my mind then. I just think it's more fun that way, more genuine, I guess, but it also gives me the ability to move things around someday if I really wanted to, because I can go, well, I went back, reevaluated, blah, 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 and I was totally in the moment when I was talking about this anyways. I was affected by this. So you see, it gives me deniable plausibility. Is that what it's called? Deniable plausibility? Tell me down in the comments. So anyways, guys, let's get into this, shall we? Now, I have taken all of my top films, so I have 12 movies that I'm going to rank to number 1 to number 12, and I've also got a few honorable mentions that I want to discuss before we head over to the series of tubes that we like to call the internet and start ranking all of these films. So the first movie I want to talk about on the list is a very personal film for me. It was set back in the 90s, and it really hit home because not only is this film set in the 90s, but it's also in the Midwest. So there's a lot of things about this film that really touched base with me, and that's the movie Snack Shack. Now, this film was really misadvertised, I think. When it came out, the trailer made you feel like you were going to go see some wackadoodle teen sex comedy, and in reality, it was a really good coming-of-age film. And I think that this movie really deserved a lot more attention than it got. From what I understand, it hasn't even been given any kind of like DVD, Blu-ray release. I feel like the film is only available right now on digital rental services. I think it might be on Amazon Prime for subscribers, I'm not sure. But if you get an opportunity, and especially if you are a child of the 90s, and I don't mean child, I should change that to teenager of the 90s, because it was different, you know. I didn't really care about the Tamagotchi and Furbies and that shit. I was doing other things at this point in time in the 90s. So it's a really good dive into it, and it's very, very well done. The complaints I did have on this movie is, yeah, I mean, it's about 14-year-olds, okay? The kids are supposed to be 14, and they're in some very adult situations. So yes, the actors who are playing these characters are of age. They're 18 and 20, I believe. And, oh, yeah, they kind of look like 18 and 20-year-olds. But again, for a movie like this, you can't necessarily have the age group that you want. You can't have kids doing some of this stuff, is what I'm trying to say. But really good film. Next up, I forgot to mention, these are in no particular order, by the way. The honorable mentions, no particular order. Next up is Villains, Inc. This is a little comedy that came out and blew my socks off. This cracked me up. It's kind of like an opposite Vills thing. So you know the Mystery Men, all right? If you've ever heard of that 1990s superhero comedy that would honestly do freaking gangbusters today. It was a big flop back in its time. But anyways, I digress. This is the villain's tale. So this is a world where superheroes are very common, commercial, and so on and so forth. And so are the villains, actually. It kind of has a combination of the Venture Brothers and the other one I mentioned, Mystery Men. God dang. Don't grow older, kids. Well, anyways, it's kind of a mash-up of those types of things, and it killed me. I loved this film, and unfortunately, I don't know where it is right now, so if you can find it out there, check out Villains Incorporated, starring Colin Mockery of Whose Line Is It Anyways, and he definitely brings the jokes in this film, guys. I don't know how much of this was a script for him. I really wonder if they just told Colin, just fuck it up, man. And that's what he did, because this movie's hysterical. Up next is a fun little story about the old folks in our country, and that is Thelma. Thelma tells the story of an older woman who is in her 90s. I believe she's 94, who the actress who played her is also in her 90s. And this is also Robert Roundtree's last film. He's in this also. So it tells the story of a little old lady who gets conned by some con artists over the phone, and instead of just taking this lying down, this woman decides to hop on her scooter and find the people who scammed her. This film is hysterical, and it's just one of those fun, feel-good movies. Parker Posey's in this film also. It's just good. It's just one of those movies that you watch and you sit back and you go, yeah, Thelma, yeah. And also, like I said, last film. So, anyways, good, fun little movie to check out because it was just a lot of fun. I believe it, again, I think it is streaming. I think it's on Hulu. So if you are a Hulu subscriber, check that one out. Next up is another movie that I was not expecting to enjoy as much as I did, and that is the movie Your Monster. Your Monster tells the story of a woman who, she goes through a really bad breakup at a really bad time in her life. The woman is recovering from a cancer diagnosis, She's recovering from surgery from cancer, and while she's in the hospital, her boyfriend decides that this whole situation is just way too much work for him and bounces. He breaks up with her in the hospital. So needless to say, this causes some built-up frustrations and anger. She goes home, and when she's home, all of that forms her true-to-life monster. And this monster and her then kind of form a bond and friendship and everything. They have like a roommate situation going on. But this is a really fun horror comedy that really relies more on the comedy. The only horror in this film is the fact that there is a monster, and the monster isn't even really terrifying. He just kind of looks like, Ron Perlman in Beauty and the Beast, to be perfectly honest. He's really fun, really charismatic, and this is also Melissa Berea, and I think this is one of the best performances I've seen out of her yet in her career. So if you are a fan of her, if you're a fan of monster movies with a lot of comedy involved in it, this is one that you really need to check out. Oh, and also, if you're a fan of stage musicals, this is one to check out too, because there's a whole thing with that also. This brings me to my next honorable mention, and I think this one's going to cause a little, my next two honorable mentions I have a feeling is going to cause discussion down in the comments, but in a good way, not in a bad way. And that is Deadpool and Wolverine. Oh, I know, it's not on my best of, and I'm sorry I'm getting to that, and why. Deadpool and Wolverine was a super fun movie, do not get me wrong. I had a blast with this film, laughed my ass off, but it brought nothing new to the table. This is just an MCU movie with dick and fart jokes and the F-bomb. That's all it is. And not that that's a bad thing, but it still hits every freaking beat of a MCU film. You have, two guys, or at least one person, whatever, hero, who is trying to overcome something. And I know I'm just basically, talking about every superhero movie in the entire world, but it's filled with absolute nostalgia bait and just a ton of fan service and quippy jokes. Really well done action to keep you interested in, and then just absolute fan service throughout the entire movie. And not that that's bad, because I think the movie handled it in a good way, but it's just the MCU formula. We've been there, done that. This time around, they just brought F-bombs, but really good actors that sold the characters with great charisma and all. But I guess my problem with the whole thing was, again, I keep saying it didn't bring anything new to it, and it didn't. But that's not terrible, because the film itself is extremely rewatchable. It's a lot of fun. It just didn't have the oompa that I wanted it to have to be on my tops list. That brings us to the final film, and pretty much the exact same excuse that I have for Deadpool Wolverine, and that is Inside Out 2. Now, while this film was gorgeously animated, really well acted, great story that made me hit me in the feels, it is a sequel. And I feel like it had the success of the first film to kind of help that movie a little bit. And I do have sequels on my list, don't get me wrong, because 2024 was the year of sequels. But I tried to kind of scale it down. But anywho, this movie was great. I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. It just kind of felt very similar to the first movie. It didn't really, in my opinion, bring anything new to the story. It just expanded the story, which isn't terrible. It was fun and it was great for kids. I feel that, it's about age appropriate for kids who might have seen the movie back when it first came out, and it ages with them, I think. I forget how old she was supposed to be in those films. I think she was like 7 or 8 or something, and she's in her early teens in this one. And so I like that the movie, aged with its fan base, I guess you could say, and it brought in a lot more of that to the character. But all in all, in the world of Inside Out 2, we really didn't see a lot there. We did have some new additions of characters, and those new characters were great, not like Moana 2 by any means, which we will not have on this list. But all in all, guys, it just, again, didn't have that oompa to get it up there on the top tiers list of the movies. Okay, guys, so you know what? I have been yammering on way too freaking long on honorable mentions, so it's time for us to get over to that big old series of tubes that we call the internet and go over my actual top films of 2024. Welcome to the internet, folks. Let's get things started. Well, okay, before I get things started, just real quick, I am putting a best of horror of 2024 also. So if there's no horror movies on this list, just wait. They are getting their own list because, as we all know, horror is my favorite genre. So this movie would just be all horror movies if it was my favorite of 2024 anyways. So horror gets its own special little list. So let's get this started, shall we? Alrighty. That is 12. There are 12 months in the year, so my list is 12 to 1. So we're going to get things started with number 12 of the year 2024, and that is a fun little action film by the name Land of Bad. Land of Bad tells the story of a platoon that gets stuck behind enemy lines. Or I guess they get stuck by enemy lines. Anyways, pirates take over this island that they happen to be on, and so they're being hunted by these pirates. Alright, there we go. They're just genuine bad dudes. And I guess that's the worst thing about this film is the villains. Like, they're just bland, boring, bad dudes, which is fine because the movie itself is just a really fun, low-budget throwback to the 90s. I want to say this film had a budget of like $20 million, and it looks gorgeous. And that's the reason why it finds itself on its list, because there are so many, huge budget films this year that just looked awful. I'm talking to you, Gladiator 2. But this movie somehow, with its low budget, was able to pull off a beautifully done action film with practical effects filmed on location. This movie takes place in the jungle, and guess what? It's a jungle. This isn't a bunch of green screen CGI BS. It's real trees and shit. The cinematography is gorgeous. The acting is pretty good. Russell Crowe is our big star in this one. He plays a drone pilot who is trying to help these guys get out of this land of bad. And yeah, I know, the name of this movie's terrible. I'm not going to beat around the bush on that one. I also brought it up in the review I did of it. And by the way, guys, all of these movies that I'm talking about, I have done full reviews on. So if I don't go over it very much in detail, just check out my reviews on my channel. So yeah, Land of Bad, if you can find it out there streaming, I think it is on I know it is on DVD because I'm about to buy it. It just got released on DVD, but I think it is out there on VOD services, and also definitely check out Land of Bad. All right, that brings us to number 11. Now, pardon me, guys. Pardon me again. Now, this is one of those movies that has a very touchy subject to it, but it's also one of those subjects I feel that we need to have a discussion about, and that is the movie Origin. Now, this film is based off of the book of the same name. At least I believe it's the same name, as far as I can remember. But anyways, it's based off of a book. And it doesn't necessarily tell the story of the book, because the book is more of a resource book, like a nonfiction. It's just interviews and all with people. But it goes into the origin of basically hatred, bigotry, racism, things of that sort, just going into these different cultures and countries and just learning who the person on the bottom of the totem pole is and how did they get there, what caused them to be the low person on the totem pole, basically. And I thought this movie brought up a lot of good subject matter. I thought it went in a good area, and it talks about a very touchy subject, but in a very understanding, non-preachy way. The film itself tells the story of the author going around getting the information and interviewing sources and talking to other scholars and all. And I think by doing that and like telling the story of how the book was made, it really makes it, more of a story and relatable and something that people can watch and enjoy. It's not just, throwing facts at you, even though it kind of does, but still, you know what I'm talking about. It's a really good story and you should check this film out. I don't know where it is out there. I think we would have heard more about this film, but unfortunately, I don't think the right distributor got their hands on this. This was released by Neon. Now, while Neon has released some awesome horror movies, this movie really wasn't there. Like, they didn't know what to do with it, I think. And so it just kind of got thrown out there with no kind of anything, no advertisement whatsoever. I went and saw this movie, and the people I saw the movie with, too, really reacted to it, and it brought up a lot of, probably discussion on the drive home or something, friends, family, whatever. Anyways, good movie. Check it out if you get the opportunity. Okay, guys, that brings us to number 10. And number 10 on the list is His Three Daughters. His Three Daughters comes to us from Netflix, and it's one of their few wins that they've had this year. They've got another one on this list, but Netflix has not really been delivering this year. They've had a lot of stinkers, which we will be discussing later in my worst of 2024. But let's move on. His Three Daughters. His Three Daughters tells the story of three women who come together at the end of their father's life. He's in hospice, and they're going through the therapy and all with end-of-life counselors on what to expect and where things are headed from here on out. And let me tell you guys, this movie is one seriously intense drama. It will pull out the feels in you, but it takes you on an emotional roller coaster ride because it's a good little family drama. It brings in some comedy into it, and it has a hell of a cast with outstanding performances. So if you just want to watch a nice little tear fest in the middle of the afternoon or something on a nice rainy day, I suggest His Three Daughters on Netflix. Okay, number 9 is also, wow, we're still in the drama department, The Bike Riders. There is a little bit of action in this, a little bit of crime, but it's pretty much drama at heart. And this film tells the story of the early days of the good old biker gangs before they were the Hells Angels that everyone hears about, where they were, trafficking certain substances they shouldn't be doing and, beating up a bunch of people at concerts. This was basically just a bunch of blue-collar guys that really loved motorcycles and just wanted to be able to pool their money together to buy more motorcycle stuff. That's really all it was. Now, there are some moments, yes, they do, they're tough guys, let's just put it that way. If you mess with one of theirs, expect them to come looking for you. But it was a retribution type situation, not criminal, even though it is criminal, but you know what I mean. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Anyways, this is a really interesting film to watch if you're someone who really loves bike culture, because this tells the early days before a lot of the negative stuff came into the community, because that's what this film focuses on the most, is the community of the bike riders. So that's why why it finds itself on this list, because to be perfectly honest, guys, they really remind me of the dudes my dad used to hang around with. Now, my dad didn't hang around with just bikers. There were guys who worked on muscle cars and stuff like that. But I grew up in a very motorhead kind of family. My father spent most of his life working at the Ford plant over in KC here, Clay Como, and then later became a teacher. But yeah, these are the kind of guys I grew up with, to be perfectly honest. So they got a special place in my heart. I liked this movie. It really made me feel homey. So here it is, my number 9. That brings us to number 8, and number 8 is another Netflix movie, and that is The Imaginary. Now, The Imaginary is a film. I'm going to take a drink real quick. Now, The Imaginary is a really, really beautifully animated film. I love the animation in this film. The voice acting is spot on. It's really great. But the story itself is not something super original, but it's still super fun. Basically, if you know Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, that's imaginary, okay? To be perfectly honest, it tells the story of imaginary friends. One in particular who is learning about things. Basically, it goes on an adventure of imaginary friends. It's not necessarily Foster's home for imaginary friends. It's just like there is a place where all the imaginary friends hang out. They're being actually hunted by an evil force and everything. So there is more of an action story tied to this adventure, excuse me. So it's a lot of fun, very beautifully animated, well acted, just an all-around beautiful film. So that brings us to number 7, diving back into serious crap with the movie Civil War. I'm surprised, because I've watched a lot of other folks' best of 2024 lists on the YouTubes, and I haven't seen this movie pop up recently, and I was surprised by that because I really felt like this movie going into it, there was a ton of buzz. And I do feel like this movie did get kind of a 50-50 vibe when it came out. Those people that really dug this movie, and then, you know, the 50 part. But I was on the other side. I thought this was an extremely well-made film. I liked the way that it followed journalists around, and if you're wondering, because I haven't given the synopsis yet, Civil War tells the story of an alternate universe, United States, where civil war has broken out between all of the different states. There's different factions and all, but this story is about the journalist trying to get the scoop on what's going on with the war. So I like the fact that we're really following these journalists going around and not necessarily following all of the big events of the war. This movie had a very small budget, and it also looks outstanding. Actually, it was a very large budget from what I understand for A24, but in the grand scheme of things, still a pretty small budget for a movie such as this. We lean into a lot of special, like really cool practical effects in this movie. Not a lot of CGI, just really good acting and all. This film has some outstanding performances and some downright scary, tense scenes. And I know you guys who have seen this movie know which scene I am talking about. All in all, this movie really delivers if you're looking for a nice thrill fest. Okay, after Civil War, diving back into the world of animation with Mars Express. Now, while Mars Express may look like an anime, it's actually from France. This is a cyberpunk animated film that tells the story of two detectives who are trying to solve a mystery of these AIs, or androids, that are coming to life. They're supposed to stop them. All the androids are supposed to be kind of like tied to another person, or if I remember that correctly. But anyways, guys, it is a cyberpunk basic, film. All right. It's a great mystery story attached to it, some beautiful animation, and this movie really delivers in a lot of areas. If you are a fan of Ghost in the Shell, I'm really trying to keep this quick, so I'm trying to think quickly and give you some good stuff here, right? If you're a big fan of the Ghost in the Shell series, the Ghost in the Shell movies and whatnot, you're probably going to really love this film. I do not know where it is out there. Google it, try to find it, support this movie because it was just such a really well-made movie, and I would like to see the director of this film put out more stuff. From what I understand, there is more work. I do not know if it's in this universe or not, but man, I really hope we see some more out of this. The movie's ending is kind of ambiguous and left up to you on what's going on, so I could see the ability to throw in something that could become a sequel, but even if this is a standalone film, maybe something in this universe. That would be really cool to see this just keep going. All right, that brings us to number 5. Number 5 is a movie that I was not expecting to have this much fun with, and that is Sonic the Hedgehog 3. I really enjoyed this movie. It's just a super fun little family film that you can get out there, watch with the kids, and have an absolute blast doing it at the same time. This movie delivers in all of the Easter eggs and fandom that you want for all of us Sonic fans of not just the video games, but also the anime series. The Easter eggs are not just with the modern 3D gaming also. There's plenty of fun throwbacks to all of the other games that were on the Sega Genesis. All in all, guys, super fun film, great little holiday flick, and from what I understand, it's still doing pretty good at the old box office. So keep supporting Sonic 3. So, Paramount's already announced that they're definitely working on Sonic 4. And by the way, I brought it up in my my review of this. There is 2 after-credit scenes. There's a mid-credit scene, and then there's an after-credit scene. Very intimate. You gotta wait for it all. And then there's a really cool little ending there, just to give you a little tidbit of information. Okay, that brings us to number 4, and we're still staying in the kind of the family-friendly animated film stuff with The Wild Robot. And the reason why The Wild Robot finds itself at number 4 is because, guys, this movie took me on an emotional roller coaster ride. This film was beautiful. I loved every aspect of this movie. The animation, gorgeous. Voice acting, perfect. The story, relatable, and also at the same time very human, even though you have a robot and a talking goose and fox and other animals. This film was extremely relatable. It really dives into what it means to be a parent. It really focuses a lot on single parenthood, which I really appreciated. This movie is just all in all just a gorgeous, beautiful film. It will easily go down as an animated classic. So I'm looking forward, to be perfectly honest, this is the type of movie that I'm totally okay with being a standalone film because it's just that freaking good, but I would not say no to a sequel because I'd kind of like to see where this goes. It's based off a series of books, so there's still more story to be told. So I'm kind of looking forward to where this goes. And this movie also really captured its own animation style, and in my opinion, it really cemented DreamWorks and saying, this is who we are, this is our animation style, this is what we're doing from here on out. And I like that it finally gave DreamWorks its own personality. Beautiful film, loved every moment of it. Check out The Wild Robot. Bringing in the number 3 spot is a movie that I keep referencing throughout the year, and that is Coup. Starring Peter Sarsgaard, an actor who I have been following throughout the year, and I have enjoyed every performance that he has given, and especially this movie. I love this film for everything it's able to do on such a small budget. It's an independent film, and everything just comes together to deliver a very cohesive, coherent story and message. The film gives you a story that's both relatable at the same time being unfamiliar. It takes place during the Spanish flu. It tells the story of a wealthy family in New York who decide to skip out of town and go off to a private island above the rich people while the Spanish flu is just, getting all the poor folk. Well, this gentleman decides he isn't going to have that. He's getting off of the freaking New York plateau, I think it is, whatever, peninsula. Anyways, he's getting out of New York anyways, too, to get on that private island. So he disguises himself as a cook that they hired to come to the island with them. So he comes in, he meets the staff, meets the family, and forms a coup to overthrow the master of the house. Guys, this is an extremely fun comedy of class warfare, and it tells a story that's both familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. Because yes, it does give you some 2020 vibes, but by making it the Spanish flu, it doesn't feel so icky too soon. You know what I'm talking about? It's just relatable. So you get where everyone's coming from in this entire movie. So I love the way that it delivers its message. It involves comedy, and it has a lot of great, just awesome shot moments. This film just is such a real masterwork of what you can do filming in just one location if you got a good eye for cameras. I really had a great time. The cast on this film, outstanding performances. As I said, Peter Sarsgaard plays our lead in this. He plays the cook who builds the coup. I just love this film, and I just wanted to get support and get out there, let others see it. I don't know if it's streaming on any streaming services. Give it a look up. Definitely check this film out. All right, coming in at number 2 is a movie that I think everybody was, really expecting to be a kind of a crap fest, and that is Wicked. Wicked, of course, is the prequel, I guess you could say, of Wizard of Oz. Let's just go with that. It tells the story of the witches, the Wicked Witch of the West and Glinda the Good Witch, and when they were going to school together and all. This is a musical. It's based off of the Broadway performance, but the Broadway performance that's based off of the book of the same name. I just like doing that. Everyone knows this movie. It's the hotness. It's everywhere. There was marketing up the ass for this film. There was color-changing mac and cheese, man. I mean, it was a blast. It really was. It was a fun little film, and it is making me excited for what's coming down the line. I'm looking forward to part 2 so much. Even though part 1, these kind of films, when they have the part 1, part 2, they leave you feeling unsatisfied in the end of them. You're just kind of like, God dang it, now I gotta sit around for another freaking year, 2 years until they finish the next one. Ooh, not this movie. You get a nice, complete story that you can walk away from and be like, that was fun. What a good little film that was. I had a great time with this one, and I really think that this film is going to go down as a classic moving forward. All right, that brings us to our number 1 movie of the year. Number 1, top tier, the big kahuna, if you will, and that is, here we go, Dune 2. Dune 2, and I'm hoping we're still gonna get Messiah. Dune 2 was just amazing. The book series that could never be adapted, or book, or what have you. It can't be adapted to film. I mean, even the mighty David Lynch tried, and even though I enjoyed that film, it's still not nearly as good of adaptation as we've seen with the first Dune and now Dune Part 2. This series is beautiful. It's amazing. It blends together practical and CGI in amazing ways. You have so many different factions and stories and such going on. These films are just epic in the proportion, epic in scale. Both films are just masterworks of cinema, and I cannot wait to see what's going on next. And I know there's the Max series, and I'm really considering checking that out. I do not know. I know it takes place it's like a prequel, I guess, like way in the past, like hundreds of years or something like that. But I am probably going to check that film out. I don't know how related it is to the Dune movies. I never sat down and read these books. I've always been more of a fantasy nerd when it comes to books and more of a sci-fi movie guy. So I've been kind of waiting for these movies, and I'm so glad they're so great. The acting is spot on. The special effects are absolutely gorgeous. The cinematography is beautiful. As I said, the use of practical and CGI flows seamlessly throughout these films. I keep saying epic, and that's because that's what this movie is. Completely and absolutely epic. And that's why it's number 1. Well, there you have it, guys. 2024 non-horror movies from my least favorite to most favorite. Well, I shouldn't say least favorite. Number 12, top favorite movies of 2024. So thanks again, guys, for checking out The Film Geek. If you liked what you saw here today, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, ring that bell for notifications, and give me the old thumbs up so I know you like what you're seeing. And if there's one more thing you could do, folks, that is keep watching movies. You know I'm gonna.